Check out the link in the description below and you can find a worksheet that goes along with this lesson. Welcome back to Ukulele Corner. Now that we've looked at learning these CAGED shapes, actually the C, A, G, F, and D movable chord shapes that now can move to all sorts of other positions and create other chords using bar chord technique and movable fingering shapes, let's dive into learning a little bit about chord harmony and theory so that we can apply using these concepts and play songs in any key. And so the first thing that we want to do is take a look at one of the very fundamental building blocks of music. And what we're going to do is take a C major scale and harmonize it. So we're going to build a chord on each one of the notes of the scale. So a C scale would go from the third string open, C, to D on the second fret, then E on the second string open, F, second string first fret, G on the third fret, A, high string open, second fret B, and then back to C. Now when we look at moving these, we're looking at major chords to start with. We'll look at minor chords later and related scales to the actual CAGED shapes, which are amazingly useful. But the first step, we're going to look at what the chords are when we harmonize a scale and which ones are major. Those are the ones we're going to focus on. So if we harmonize a C major scale, the way that it works out is that the one chord, or the chord we start with, C, is major. The next note in the scale, we just go up the alphabet. C goes to D. The 2 chord, we call it, the second note of the scale, but it's minor. The 3 chord is minor as well. The 4 chord, this is an important one we're going to try to remember here, is F. The note F, C, D, E, F. It's 4. And remember, 1 so far and 4 are major. Also 5, which would be G. G is major. Then we get to the 6th chord, which is A. A is going to be minor. And then there's one sort of strange chord in this harmonized scale. We have 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, the 7th note of the scale. That note B is what's called a diminished chord. And right now what we're actually going to do is just play a G7 without the G, the 4th string in there, and that works fine. So what we're going to get is this really interesting and beautiful sound of a harmonized scale. If I play the chord tone and then the scale, just using open position chords to start with, then we have this E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, then back to C. Notice what I'm doing. I'm playing the note and then the full chord. C, D minor, E, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and back to C. Now, believe it or not, there are literally thousands and thousands of songs that use chords directly from that system and that harmonized chord scale. And you can play this and move it around to any other key. It always is that relationship with what we call a diatonic scale, or a scale that doesn't have any accidentals away from the key center. So in C, we don't have any sharps or flats here. It's just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If we played in other keys, we'd be introducing sharps or flats to the key signature. That's how we get away from the key of C. So if we played in G, for example, G, then we have A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. That's what makes the key of G different, is that one note, that F sharp. But the same formula would apply to the key of G. The 1 chord is major, 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, and then the 7 is diminished. But what we often do is we go back to the 5 chord for the 7th chord, and we play a dominant 7 version of that. In the key of C, we played G7. Just play that shape and it sounds great. So now, let's think in the key of C. What are the major chords? We decided we did C, F, and G. 1, 4, 5. Maybe you've heard that before. Oh, this song is a 1, 4, 5, like the blues uses 1, 4, 5 progressions. Those chords are very, very commonly used. They're very fundamental in any key. Now that we know our CAGED shapes and we know how to move around, just by moving our fingers and learning how to connect the different chords in each position, we can find those chords very easily. And so it's a wonderful tool to use to really broaden your horizons in your music. So let's look at that with the open position, C. Now let's go to the 4 chord, F, and then G. Think about this. It's 1 chord, C, D, E, F, 4 chord, C, D, E, F, G, 5 chord. So 1, 4 chord, 5 chord, 1. So that's how the system of numbering works. You often see Roman numerals that are written out for these chord shapes instead of actually just using solid numbers. Roman numerals are used. And often an uppercase Roman numeral is a major chord, a lowercase with a little m beside it is a minor chord. So let's try to do that again. C, let's do 4 strums. F is a 4 chord, then G is the 5 chord. Let's go back to C. So that's a 1, 4, 5, 1 progression. It goes 1, C, then we go to 4, is F, 5 is G, and then back to 1, C. So we're leaving out all those major chords and that diminished chord as well. And a very common substitute for G in the 5 chord is you make it a G7. That sounds really similar. There's just one note that's different. It pulls really nicely. There's this really beautiful voice leading there. Now with the same concept, let's do a little bit counting and remember that the way that the musical scale works, we go from A up to G, and then we don't continue in the alphabet, we go right back to A, right? So if we start on G, and let's try this system in the key of G major. G is 1, then we go back to A, B, C is 4. So if you play a G major and a C, then the next note up is going to be D, D major. So G is 1 in the key of G. C is now 4. It's no longer 1 because we're in a different key. And then D is 5. Remember how we moved these shapes up the neck when we learned our bar chord positions? This is going to be tremendously helpful if you can start to see how the distance and how this relates together. So before you know it, you'll be able to use your CAGED shapes and these bar chord shapes to play in other keys. As soon as you can start to recognize where the 1s and the 4s and the 5s are. Later on, you can add major chords. You can play chords that are passing chords out of the key. You can add in accidentals just by moving the shapes around. And little by little, you start with the fundamentals of knowing your chord scale, and then you can really expand on from there. So that's the first step. See if you can memorize the chord scale in the key of C major. Then look for your 1, 4, 5 chord in the key of C. We also looked at G. Start right there, and I'll be right back with a lot more on this idea.